Hello, guys. Welcome to the live stream. Welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. And as you know, this is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain that which is most factual and logically consistent. So today, we're going to be talking about wokeness again. It seems we've been talking about wokeness in the past few streams, but most of the time when we talk about wokeness, it's usually relates to sort of wokeness on the left. So my question is wokeness, is it specifically a left thing, or is it something that can also be found on the right? Are there any sorts of behaviors that one could attribute to wokeness and say, okay, this is the right version of what it means to be woke? Or simply woke is something that has to do with the left? At least from my understanding of what woke is, from the original meaning of what I think woke is, I think it means to be aware, to be conscious of social injustices, and to want to do something to remedy it, to want to further a cause to remedy those sort of social injustices and inequality. But like everything that evolves, like all concepts, words, cultures, phenomena, ideas that evolves, I think at this point that the word woke has evolved to mean something entirely different from what it originally meant. It is more so like a pejorative that people on the right sort of use against people on the left. I may be wrong, but that is sort of my thinking, that it has become a pejorative to when you see someone is woke now, what comes to your mind is someone who is sort of entitled, someone who is just, you know, causing trouble for other people, one who is virtue signaling. So those are sort of the concepts of what it means to be woke that I think that the word woke has come to take. Those are the sort of meanings that I think it has come to take. But on the other hand, is it just the left that can be woke? Is it just the left that can virtue signal? Is it just the left that can be sort of quote unquote irrational and want to play to certain things to their base or something? Is it just the left? Can't we also find that on the right? So that's the conversation that I want to have today, and I do not want this to be a monologue. um, I want people to actually call in and join me in this conversation, so I'm going to put up the link to call in the chat, in the comment box, so anyone can.
So it's more so of they realize that women are looking for certain traits that they might not have, and that it has nothing to do, might not have anything to do with how they view themselves or their personal opinions about themselves, or oh, I'm a nice guy, or theoretically, this theoretical model of why they should be successful in dating is incorrect, that they actually have to more so adhere to a more base biological model of, you have to meet some basic standards of face symmetry, like you have to have like a certain level of masculinity, assertiveness, and maybe not display certain traits that women just don't want, and on a either historical or biological basis, women kind of run away from. So, I mean, I would say that's the version of the red pill, or like the wokeness on the right, but it's not like one-to-one they're doing the exact same thing. It's not like the aims of wokeness has it's not like red pill is aiming to also take over the universities, or like they're going on, they're looking at and paying attention to different fundamental ideas of how reality works. And because they believe that reality works in fundamentally different ways depending on either one of those ideologies, they're not going to do the exact same thing. They're going to poke at different issues. They're going to poke at different absurdities. That's why, people who are quote unquote red pilled will mock wokeness, because wokeness believes more so in, that you can construct society in a particular way if you just get everyone to act out certain attitudes. And then suddenly reality will change. While the red pill side, like the red pill's like, that's ridiculous. You're just gonna say, like, if I just pretend there's a unicorn, suddenly unicorn will appear. But that's not how reality works, based off of their basis of their awakening. So it's there. So I would say, yeah, there are different there's differences on each side. And again, things that would become more extreme on the right in terms of red pill, like they will literally, some of them will kind of, it gets even more darker, like black pilled, where it's much more of a nihilistic, bleak view of reality, that certain people shouldn't just survive anymore. They're just going to be eliminated from the gene pool. That women are all cheaters, that there's no point of educating women, because that means that they're gonna screw over men even more. And so yeah, it's just that it hits on a different level of society, and the fundamental basis of what they're realizing or being awakened to the reality is going to cause them to act in different ways.
Wow, I never thought about it this way. I mean, if at all I was thinking about wokeness on the right, I never thought that you could even take it to the angle of red pill. But it does make sense, because I think the red pill movement started as a result of, okay, we are being awakened to certain things, being awakened to maybe the fact that men's rights are not being taken care of, and so maybe in the courts, in divorce courts, men are just getting the shitty end of the deal, and all that. So even though I think that red pill movement centers more around a gender kind of discussion more than any other ideological base, but I think it does make sense. Uh, and to see that it has also morphed into something else with the rise of the false alphas and all those things, people who just give you certain formulas, and they
Mm-hmm.
want to tell you that this is how to be a man, this is how to be a real man. And the irony of it is that they are displaying those typical behaviors that they criticize the women of being. For example, they are very
Yes.
thin skinned, and they're not very mature, they're very confrontational. Yet, and how are you telling other people to be better when you're doing the exact same thing? So, in a way, what I think happens is that these things, they start off very well. There's underneath it, there is something substantive. There's a good goal that they're trying to achieve, but it just morphs into this monstrosity very, very quickly, because everybody is trying to latch onto this new thing, and it just births something that is entirely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I would like to address Anand's question. He had a question to me. It's like, would I say that one reason that many conservatives do bad academically is because of wokeness, because they lack self confidence? I would question the premise that they inherently do bad academically. You have to kind of look at, I mean, you kind of have to look at what by what criteria. I mean, I know and work with many like intelligent conservatives who do well in school, right? I'm not. I like the thing is the things that they disagree with academia is they're not saying, oh, the teacher keeps flunking me, or I can't get the concepts right. I don't. They're not lacking self confidence. Actually, that's what the woke people are accusing the conservatives of, basically having too much confidence because of their privilege. They don't like, so, and they're trying to defend, basically what they have. And it's like, no, I've worked hard for whatever. And, they're standing up for themselves. So I don't think they lack confidence. It's mainly that, when I see conservatives, at least the ones that I know, criticize the academic institutions, they are claiming that they don't agree with their agenda, and they don't view that the agenda fueled curriculum is worth it. Like, they're not going to spend $100,000 on something and to learn something or to educate their children in something that they view is bad for their future, whether the future of the mind of their children or just the future of just society in general. They don't see the point of, learning, like, that they would mock, like, you mocking the idea of like gender studies or all these like identity studies type of thing, and they think that the more practical things like STEM, yeah, like that. And that's where I mostly interact with conservatives. I've never really, well, not that I talked to many, like had that many English classes, but I didn't really hear that many conservative opinions in my world literature classes, but I don't think that many conservatives were taking those classes. And those classes are kind of, because they're of a softer art, you know, when you get a bad grade in that class, it's not even like, oh, you're not as smart. It could just be that your teacher is biased, and I've experienced that myself. So it doesn't have really much to do with like conservatives are dumb and they just need to get more confidence and they'll be smarter and they can go into these elite universities. They inherently are taking themselves out of elite universities because they see it as not as worth it based off of their criteria as to what an education should provide.
But don't you think that conservatives are maybe too clinical in their approach to things, and maybe they are not putting a human face to things? Don't you think that they are just, it's they have probably have this idea of survival of the fittest? But is that how we should be running a society?
Well, I do think that the thing is that they do put a human face on things, but it's more so people that are closer to their circle, right? They are going to, what they're going to do is, if their kid is having an issue, they're going to prioritize that problem versus some person down the street is having an issue. Like, if there are those two, there are those two things of where I could donate $500 to this person's GoFundMe so that they can get this surgery, or if my kid is having an issue that requires me to spend $500 to like get them a new laptop so they can do better in school, they're going to spend it on their kid first. And so from the outside, it looks like they're being cold and callous because they're not helping that stranger, but they are actually showing love, care, and attention to people that are closest to them. And someone from outside that interaction isn't going to notice. It just looks like they're keeping to their own, right? And it does, like, it kind of grows outside of that. So once their family is good, then they're probably yeah, they'll care more about like their church, their extended family, their community. And then once all those kind of circles are good, then they would kind of care about those things that are further outside their realm of influence, but they can see that their care can be effective, right? But it is more so of it is a choice to focus on your energy on where it is the most effective. And I think that is one thing that I feel is the left needs to understand a little bit better, because they want to put like all these policies into areas that they actually don't really understand that well. But throwing money at a situation that you don't fully understand, or trying to change a policy just because you care, doesn't mean that it's going to go the way that you want. And you might actually end up exacerbating a situation because you're not close to it and you don't understand. So, but like, so I think it's not, that is honestly my bias of like, I would personally focus my attention on things that I know I know I understand, and I know I can change, and I know I have an effect on. And then, my concern kind of disproportionately reduces the less that I realize that I can affect those things. Because I mean, it's to focus all of your energy on things that you have less control over. Is I don't know. What I've seen is some people just go mad, right? They they um, they acknowledge that they're less effective, but they're just their complaint is that society just is working out for them, but and they're completely ignoring the things that maybe they can change and slowly build up. It's that whole Jordan Peterson thing of like, before you go out to change the world, clean your room. And conservatives are focused on cleaning their room before they assert themselves and go out to the world to fix other people's problems. And I understand how that can be cold and calculating, but it's kind of the truth of, the criticism that conservatives aren't going out to fight the same feudal battle that liberals are, um, on a certain extent. I think is sometimes kind of nonsensical. Like they should be making the same mistake that I am. Why aren't they?
Okay, but if I were to push back a little bit, I would say that clean your room. Can you actually get your room perfectly? Because Jordan Peterson says, put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. That is an extremely difficult thing to achieve. I mean, how the hell are you going to put your house in perfect order
Well,
before you criticize the world? It means you're not going to get anything done aside trying to make your life perfect, which is an impossible goal.
I will push back. Like, I don't think he said perfect. I don't think he ever said perfect, because that is an impossible task, right? But the thing is that understanding how you operate, or understanding how these things actually work, will help you understand the world at large. And you can't just you can't run before you crawl. Like people that have gone through certain, like let's say people who are teaching another person how to paint, right? You're expecting your teacher to have gone through the same process that they're instructing you to go through now on how to paint. They know how to paint. They know the techniques. They've gone through all the stuff, but they didn't start like, I want to be a painting teacher, and they never figured out the techniques for themselves. They're going to go straight to teaching other people how to paint. I don't think that those students are going to be as skilled, like if we're talking about like life, still life paintings that need to be somewhat accurate with shadows and light and everything like that. Like, that is just kind of the basic how the world works. If you understand how, like, personally, how to get your finances in order, and then when you see someone who's struggling with their finances, you have more effective information for them, as opposed to both of you are in crippling debt and you're it's like the blind leading the blind. And then if you're going to talk about okay, America has a debt problem, I would trust someone who doesn't have debt, and someone who actually, like, once they don't have debt, and then they kind of look at they're able to take a step back, understand their psychology, understand other people's psychology, seeing the deltas between those, and then maybe making more policies on how to fix these things. You can't be in the weeds of the same problem that you're trying to fix in others. And I think that's what he's talking about with clean your room. And you can, you can actually end up being very, very proficient in a certain area and really affecting change. That person who is great with debt and who's actually, like, let's say, for example, Dave Ramsey, right? He's helping people with debt in a particular modality, but that doesn't mean that, he can be a weight loss guru. That, like, his room is clean in all aspects, but he is not asserting himself as like a health and fitness guru, right? Like, at least clean your room in the certain aspects that you're trying to help the world in. To do that perfectly in all aspects, like, only perfect people can give advice, that's completely false. But, like, at least make sure that you're kind of you have the necessary expertise, knowledge, experience in a particular area. Like, again, for like health and fitness, I would trust a person who's lost 100 pounds to help people who are overweight to lose weight, versus someone who's always been fit and thin their whole life. Like, that that bolsters your experience and your ability to go out and affect change in the world, because you actually have done it and you can help people go through the steps of doing it.
But my question is, how would you know that this person you're critiquing or you're criticizing hasn't got their act together, hasn't cleaned their room, hasn't done their business? Because at times these people are a group, and you just assign value, you just assign certain characteristics to the group. You don't know whether how would you know whether within the core of the group there are people who actually know what they're doing? So because based on their personal experience, that's why they're pushing for these things. Isn't it just assumption on the part of maybe
Some,
conservatives?
well, sometimes, but I think a lot of times when they make that criticism, they do look at like the speaker, right? The speaker can be somewhat representative of the group, or they this is where this also might be like the cringe, like the compilation of cringe woke TikToks, right? Where they look at the TikToks of people from the kind of the extreme side of liberals, and they say like this is the basis as to these are some of the people in the group that are trying to make these changes, like mental health advocacy, right? Like the prevalence of people, of some young people on the left who are um, appropriating mental illness, like they're faking mental illness to a certain extent, or they're convincing themselves they have a mental illness, is kind of wild. Like but so like they're looking at that constituency, and yeah, it's entertaining to poke fun at them, but like that constituency is in their minds when they're saying, I would trust you guys more if you kind of cleaned your own house, of like at least disavowed those types of people. But they're the left, they're kind of ignoring those elements of their group, and they keep going on with their advocacy, which kind of erodes I guess their the viewed sincerity or validity of their claims that we know how to change these things, if it's possible that they would have those elements. Because from my time in the left, right, I was starting to understand the criticisms that conservatives had, because I was seeing that in people. And it's very difficult to kind of ignore that those elements exist. And so I think that is a good point of like, can you just make sure you guys are doing your personal due diligence before you assert these claims? Because that's the thing, is like you're not necessarily seeing that they're doing the due diligence, even by kind of saying, hey guys, this element of the mental health or disability advocacy, maybe can you not do, like, say these kind of crazy things that people should get prescription drugs without like a doctor, or that anyone can self-diagnose themselves for any mental illness and then claim disability and get disability funds and all that kind of stuff. Maybe let's like immediately disavow that, acknowledge that we don't agree with that, and then move on with advocacy. Then people would trust the advocacy a lot more. But people don't want to admit the faults in their own constituency.
But how do we move from how do we create change if conservatives are saying, you know what, things are good the way they are, uh, do not rock the boat, just let things go. We know we're not living in a perfect system. We know that we need to continually improve on things. And most of the time, these people, these advocacy groups, they are not saying individuals should go out and do these specific things. They are calling for government action. They're calling for
Mm-hmm.
policies. So are you going to tell me that the government hasn't cleaned their room enough to be able to, enact these policies that would be beneficial? So it might not be these people themselves that have to do these things. They're calling for action from the government.
Mm-hmm. So I think you have to remember, on the side of the conservatives, they also want to clean up the government. Like like that, they are also advocating for like, this government organization, why does it exist? Why don't we clean it up? Why don't we free up taxpayers' money? Why don't we make these systems less complicated? They totally want to they would love to simplify the tax the tax code. And so I would disagree with the idea that the conservatives are all game for the government staying the way that it is. They, you know, they also have criticisms for the government. It's the liberals that do want a stronger, more
I'm not saying
government
I'm not saying critique or support of the government now. I'm talking about policies. You understand?
policy.
Yes, I'm talking about policies that people on the left are saying, you know what, there's a problem here. We need government action. Let's do something about it. Now, let's take an example. Let's say climate change, for example. I'm not saying it's climate change is I'm not saying the hysteria over the climate change is a good thing. You understand? But when the left comes out and says, you know what, this is a problem, government needs to do something about it, they are not saying they are supporting the government or they are not saying they're against the government. They are just saying something needs to be done. You understand?
Right.
And then I don't think it's a useful argument for the conservative to now say, well, have you done your due diligence? Have you cleaned your room?
Mm-hmm.
What makes you think that you are able to speak on this issue? They are not saying they can do it themselves. They're saying government needs to do something.
Right. So, in this hypothetical, let's say that government can do something about climate change, because that is one thing that the conservatives would disagree with, that the government really can do something about it, because it's not that the government is going to suddenly just like create a policy. They would have to enforce individuals and individual companies to do something. That's what they're asking for. They're asking for the government to impose a policy to change people's behaviors and to change companies' behaviors. So at the end of the day, it still relies on certain, like, entities who are under the purview of the government to do things, because the government can't go inside every single business and change the type of light bulb or install solar panels. Like, that still is relying on private businesses and private enterprises to do something. And I can see people being hesitant to basically implement such a radical plan that they're not even necessarily sure is going to work, right? Because something like this probably wouldn't have to be done. And, same thing with these COVID policies, or like, shutting down businesses. They're saying, like, are we sure that, one, we're going to get the result that you want, where climate change gets reduced? And you have to acknowledge, like, okay, let's say half of the businesses go out of businesses. It might be worth it for all these businesses to, like, just completely go under if we actually do solve climate change. But the skepticism with conservatives is, one, we might impose these things and lose the businesses, and two, not even fix climate change. So it might all be for naught. And so I understand the pushback for conservatives. But let's say hypothetically, all of these policies and stuff like that would be worth it. Like, it actually, we 100% know that these policy pushes are going to work. But still, like I said earlier, it still relies on, the realization of that is going to affect individual lives, right? And that's the thing that I kind of get annoyed when people are pushing for, like, a vegan diet to fix climate change. And that's one thing they might want. They want, like, why can't we have the government to enforce Americans to, one day a week, Americans aren't allowed to eat meat? That could be a policy, but that still is relying on people actually doing it, individuals actually doing it. And so, do they realize how it's going to actually impact people's lives, and recognize, that it is trying to enforce like all people to make certain personal decisions? Because at the end of the day, the government, it's not like individuals are living their lives and completely independent, like, and not affecting the environment, and the government is the person with all these smokestacks, and the government is doing all these things. They're doing these, like, these coal plants are generating energy because people want to run, they want to, power their homes, they want to power their laptops, they want to power their electronics, they want to power hospitals. All of these things have a real world connection, and it's not disconnected. And understanding how that dynamic works is very, very important. One thing that, it always irks me of how, they say cow's milk is so like, oh my gosh, it takes away so much from the environment. And, it takes like 1,000 gallons of water to grow 1 pound of beef and all this kind of stuff. That's why we should get rid of all these cows and cow farts and everything like that. And then they propose like we should drink almond milk, when to grow 1 pound of almond milk, it takes 1,000 it takes 1,000 gallons of water itself. And not only to make all, which means that you have to like, use even more water to make almond milk, and not realizing that maybe even their own personal decisions are affecting the climate in negative ways that they're blaming on cows or like animal-based products. That is not even understanding that fundamental relationship, and kind of forcing them to advocate for policies that aren't going to, one, that aren't going to fix a situation, and two, might actually make things worse. In that sense, understanding your own personal impact and how your own personal decisions actually affects the world is very important. And that's part of like, cleaning your room. You need to know the layout of your room. And if they actually did understand really what was the bulk of this energy consumption, or if there are things that we can do that would be more effective to reducing our energy consumptions in order to decrease the effect of climate change, I think they would be advocating for different policies.
Okay. So to me, I see two things. I see liberal impulsiveness and I see conservative reticence. So how do we bridge the gap so that we'll find ourselves in a middle ground where we're not too impulsive, yet we're not too laid back and say, you know what, let's not rock the boat. This might be too costly. Because at times it may seem as if the conservatives they're too careful and then nothing gets done. You understand? If there is a problem at all in the first place, the right approach is not to say, well, trying to fix it might mess it up more. The right approach might be, how can we fix this so that we don't mess things up more? But do you see conservatives doing that? Do you see them saying, okay, this is a problem. How can we solve it without messing things up? Instead of just saying, well, let's just leave it the way it is, because trying to solve it, we're going to fuck things up more.
Well, a success criteria, right? I think like the thing is that, especially, during, this COVID stuff, right? And people, like, oh, believe the science, when, like you can easily, criticize like low quality science that is kind of plainly motivated by, well, the government wants people to act this way, so they're they're looking at the data in a way that aligns with what they want people to do, right? And but if what I see is people, like, if we actually had a success criteria and we actually looked at kind of fact-based like studies, right? Like, if I would think that conservatives can be convinced by things like, hey, we did this study, we did this pilot program, these are the results. And then, I would say that, conservatives would be like, okay, if you're going to roll this thing out in this limited fashion and these are the metrics we can check, I think they'll be okay with that, as long as, it's not like an all or nothing type of policy, right? Like,
who should be convincing the conservatives? I mean, they are in the society, they understand the problem. So is it the job of someone else to do the science and come and tell them that, okay, this is a problem, this is how we're going to fix it?
Well, like,
why don't they have a skin in the game as well?
Well, the thing is that, like, if, okay, I'm on an HOA board, right? So let's say there's a person who wants like a completely, like, they want to do construction on their house, right? It's not really my job to proactively try to convince people to not make any changes to their units, right? If a person wants to make a change, they have to come with the evidence of, this is what I want to change, and this is why this is my case of why it's like, this is where it might interfere with things, but here's my reassurance that it won't interfere with these things. And so, like, the people that are proposing changes do need to come to the table with enough evidence or enough rationale, so that, you know, like if a conservative is going to look at that proposal, they can at least understand it, and they can say like, okay, I see this is where you're going, this is what you're basing it on. Okay, if you want to start this thing, if you want to start this project, you know, at least have like, you know, these are our concerns and this is our oversight, like this is my input on this. So here's what I'm going to say about like my job, right? It involves like, so my job, it's like, you know, it has an IT system, and anytime someone wants to make a change to the design of the system, they have to go to an approval board, but they have to come with the evidence as to, this is what I want, this is what I want to change, this is why I want to change it, these are the impacts, and this is what I'm going to do to make sure that I reduce these impacts or I mitigate these impacts. It is the responsibility of the person who's coming to propose the change, not the person who never thought of the change in the first place. And, you know, in this context of like, you know, let's say there's someone on the board who's their whole point is to making sure that, okay, I'm making sure that the cybersecurity of this IT system is going to be maintained. Can you reassure me that you're not going to make my job worse by introducing a vulnerability that will take down the whole system? In that situation, that person is the conservative, but they can't just make a whole decision out of whole cloth without getting more information from that person who's proposing that change. It's like a security gate, right? And the
But
conservatives in this situation are more sort of security gates, like there should be a way of getting past that gate, but the conservative can't generate information from a scenario that they never thought of in the first place.
But the thing is, the example you just gave is more an example of a corporate setting where someone is in a position of authority and has the power to say yes or no to certain changes, you understand? But in society, it isn't that the conservatives are in power and the liberals have to convince them of a problem. What I'm getting at is that, okay, is this thing a problem at all? If we agree that there is a problem, you understand, the liberal might say, you know what, we have to fix it now. I don't care how we're going to do it, we have to fix it now. It isn't that position itself is not productive, as well as the position of saying, well, we don't understand this thing yet, so let's just leave it the way it is. That position isn't productive as well. The position should be, okay, it's a problem, what do we do about it? What can we do about it? So that's basically my critique of, you know, of say the conservative position of, let's not just rock the boat too much, let's make it
you have to also understand the nature and the origin of the problem. That's the thing as well. And asking for more information as to how the problem inherently manifests, like, you know, like let's say like obesity, right? Hey, Palu. Like let's say for obesity, for example, right? Like people were acknowledging that obesity was a problem, heart disease was a problem. So I think it was like in the 70s, they rolled out, we are going to introduce trans fats, and that's going to fix the health of all these people. We're going to enforce McDonald's to introduce trans fats. We're going to force all these fast food chains to do that. And now, like when people talk about trans fats, that's a thing that they're supposed to ignore. But in terms of like the policy flowing down from the FDA, that was enforced on a mass scale. And I think that if there had been more people at the time to say, hey, let's actually understand, if we really truly understand what is making people fat, what is actually causing people to have heart disease, as opposed to just immediately jumping into a solution that has hurt more people than helped them, obviously, I think that we would be in a better spot. And I think actually studying a situation and actually understanding a situation isn't the same thing as it's okay, it's all good, we're not going to change anything, because you can't just start changing things and then studying it at the same time in order to get more understanding of the situation. If someone comes to me with a problem, I don't immediately, like, unless it's like the solution is immediate, like, you know, like your fly is down, right? You're not gonna like, I'm going to poll everyone to see if they can see my underwear before I like zip up my pants, right? Like, no, you're going to immediately, zip up your pants. But for more complex issues, you should find out, like, how pervasive is this problem, how common is this problem, how does this problem really manifest, what are the downstream effects of this problem. And that just inherently takes time. And it, like, in the same amount of time you can roll out a new solution. You, like, if you take that time that you takes to actually fully understand the situation, and you're using that same period of time to just roll out a new solution, you're making more work for yourself to even understand. Then you have to understand not only the original problem, but also maybe the mixture of, is this new solution causing this new problem? Is this exacerbated? I don't understand. I can't parse out the data from the introduction of new issue, like of this new process, versus what they were talking about with the old issue. So, like, but you can help with that if, like, let's say you are progressive, right, and you are proposing we have this problem. You at least need to fully document what the problem is, so that the conservative can look at the data and then say, like, hey, have you tried looking at it this way and exploring these things? Because, and this is like with any scientific study, right, when you propose a paper of, like, I'm explaining this phenomenon, and in peer review, another expert in that field says, okay, I see where you're going with this, but have you explored this thing? I would like to see this thing explored or this thing explained. And then the person who's doing that research, they go back and then they come back, they might fix that issue, or they might explain it away or whatever. And to have that kind of feedback loop when like, okay, I think you have your data and your information on point. Okay, now then we can move forward. But we're kind of at this point where you don't know what's real anymore, right? You don't know if someone is manipulating data to get the result that they want, because you can't really fully see the data. They're just saying, well, this statistic says this, you need to believe me. And it's like, well, can you show me the original paper? Is that really what it means? Is that really what it says? And it's, I think that's kind of the tension at this point.
Okay, Mr. Pilu.
Yeah,
Let's hear you.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a good listening to Chloe. That's a good example that she's given, and real good ways to think about that. Hope everybody listen, take it to heart. But now the question is like, okay, you say they come to the government, but before they come to the government, do they already have a critical mass of people who agree with their policies in the population? That's why they're being able to do what they do. Because we gotta ask ourselves, like, who are they appealing to first and foremost? Like, are they appealing to people first and foremost? Because the reason they're able to make policies is because they have a base of people who support their policies, and they first applying. So how do we develop a culture of less reactionary, more sensible things to go? Because not necessarily the politicians. Because look, you have many levels to the government, right? You have the people, you have the elected officials, and you have the bureaucrats. So where is the appeal coming to, and who is it coming from? What interest groups appealing to? We got to analyze all that if we're talking about a better way forward of how to translate policies into reality. So that's the only thing I want to add at this point in the conversation about with the topics that Chloe was talking about. Was like who's getting appealed to, and who's getting convinced.
All right, Stanley, jump right in.
Actually, I'd like to hear the answer to Mr. Peller's question. Then I'll go.
Okay, so Chloe, do you want to take Mr. Pelo's question?
I mean, I agree with Pelo in the fact of, you do have to look at who you're appealing to, and yeah, where you're getting this data from, because it could be a special industry, it could be a special interest group that is, cherry picking certain data to make it seem like there's a widespread problem, or extrapolating this problem to more people than it really applies. And then so, like, well, we need to change this today. We need to change this. See, like, look at this crucial issue, and then, prompting people to act. And I feel like, again, that's kind of common now politically of, they're going to a particular pool of data, they're making a study, and this is like, see, these people are in danger, we need to act now. But if you actually pull it back and you actually look at, really where they're getting that information from, you would have, you would kind of cast more doubt on, if they really have done their due diligence to truly, pure of heart identify a problem and try to fix it, instead of trying to further their own agenda under the guise of helping people.
Okay. All right, Stanley, go.
Well, I think, looking at it, kind of as a long game, America, it doesn't matter left or right, really doesn't matter at all. We have a huge history of we don't react until there is actually a crisis, because we're not sure how to fix it. And, my experience maybe doesn't apply, but there is a whole theory of you try something. Sometimes doing nothing, not taking action, is worse than, taking the wrong action. I've experienced that. Now, it's a particular experience. It's not like a whole country, but I, there's an argument that the Civil War could have been avoided easily, but people wanted to be conservative. Let's play it out. Let's kick the can down the road. And one of the things, kind of my pet peeve is Americans are the worst at taking decisive action. And, for a number of reasons, it's just my pet peeve. It's hard to get 300 million people to pull in one direction. But sometimes I think we are our own worst enemies. And, I can't say it's conservatives, though I have my tendencies of thought, but liberals are as bad. Um, the only thing, I have to say is life is not a an IT problem. It's real, and sometimes people die if you don't take some sort of action. And let's wait and see tends to be the American way, and
Wait,
it is annoying.
hey, can I
And
respond to that real quick? I'm sorry.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
only because I want to piggyback on something that Stanley says. And like, I see what
Go
he's saying
ahead.
to a certain extent, but at the same time, in my short lifetime, I'm not that old. In my short lifetime, I've seen radical changes in American society and policy. Right, in my short lifetime, I'm not an old man. Right.
Name one.
Okay, LGBTQ rights. And okay, two men getting married. When I was
That's
a kid, that didn't happen.
radical.
To me, it is. To me, it's radical.
Well,
Two men getting married is
okay.
radical.
If it's to you, I'll let you finish. I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
radical at all. We've been living with it forever.
Yeah, but two
It's
men didn't
not
get married.
But
radical. The radical
government,
Two men
part
didn't get
is
married. Two men didn't get
accepting it.
married. Two men didn't get married when I was growing up.
government acknowledging and giving them their rights to get married is the change, not that gay people exist.
It's not
Yeah,
radical,
exactly.
is my point.
But okay, that's a perception. But in my view, is radical because I don't know when do we have that in this culture, even in Western culture. I don't know that happening since over 2,000 years, right?
Start with
So
Greece.
I said in 2,000 years before. I'm talking about okay, ever since the Christian era, even in West, right? Ever since the Christian era, I don't know that happened, right? So and even in Greece, two men wasn't getting married. I don't know if two men getting married. I'm not saying homosexual affairs didn't happen, but but
Read some
two
Greek.
men were getting so they had legal marriages between two men in ancient Greece.
Well, I don't know that they really needed it.
Okay, I'm just saying that's what I'm trying to say. Gay marriage. That's one example of a radical change that happened in my
Disagree with
lifetime.
the term radical.
Can we
It
just
Okay,
move
was a
on to the term
needed
radical?
change.
Can
I
okay,
I
agree
okay,
with
move
that.
on from that?
okay. So Yeah, so just a lot of things. So I think that America has shown the ability to make radical changes, even transgenderism. But to me, that's radical. We been doing transgender, changing your, cutting your stuff off and doing that. So anyway, so I think America definitely can make radical changes. It's shown its ability to make radical changes, yeah, radical changes at radical times. I mean, whenever they want to. So I totally disagree with that part, and I think I think we need to be able to. I think it's better to be able to hold off and think, have a second thought. Whenever you have policy, we need to have second thoughts. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why they say that it's better to be a representative democracy instead of a direct democracy, is because if you use a direct democracy, you might not have a second thought. So I think the second thought is actually is not a having the ability to have a
Changes,
second thought
changes
is
in
a benefit and
civil
not
rights are not radical change. Allowing people to live their lives without, this kind of scrutiny, the specific changes I'm talking about are kind of technocratic. Not addressing something like climate change, it's a people problem because it affects people, but it's not a civil rights issue.
So I will say I do agree with you, Stanley, in the fact of people only really wait until things are at a crisis point in order to act change. But that also filters down to how people do it in reality, right? Someone could have like, oh yeah, like my foot kind of feels a little bit funny, but they're not going to immediately go to the doctor, right? They're going to wait till they have a stabbing pain, and then they go to the doctor and it's like, oh yeah, you have cancer in your ankle, right? And it's like, yeah, if we only had just gone into the doctor when it was just a slight discomfort, you would have caught it way earlier. But that's kind of not even how really humans work. We
Right.
Certain things need to rise to a certain level of where it's undeniable,
Right.
um, and until we act. And I think that is
That
a human flaw. That is a human flaw. And
No, it's a great answer. It's a great response, quite frankly.
hey,
I
but
really didn't. I'm thinking systemically. You're thinking humanly.
Mhm.
Um,
But it's the
my
systems are
only
made by
thing is, and this is a dumb objection, and I think you made probably a point I can't really debate, but damn it. Um, I expect better of my government.
right.
They're a bunch of humans, and it's a flailing answer, Chloe. I can't really um, make an effective defense.
I'm not going to disagree with you. This is one reason why I liked Andrew Yang's campaign, right? Because he had all of these ideas on how to, have these how to solve problems, how to do, like how to do studies, how to kind of research certain policies to see how effective they are, or even looking at laws that are on the books that are no longer they can look at them, they're no longer effective, actually measuring the effectiveness of certain laws. These are
Mhm.
useless, these aren't good, and then cut them out, right? He having a process. But the thing about Andrew Yang and his ideas is that they weren't exciting, they were
Oh,
mundane, they were boring. People
okay.
like
Well, you know what?
solutions
I
were,
don't know a lot about Andrew Yang. I could probably live with that kind of approach.
yeah, he
hey, can I jump in real quick? I just want to disagree with that be having a second thought is a human flaw. I think it's a human strength because in life we have to prioritize, right? No matter what, people are gonna say what is most important now. Now it doesn't mean we're gonna prioritize correctly all the time. I mean we're gonna have lapses of judgment. We're not, but the human, but a human capacity and human will to prioritize and put whatever is more pressing first is naturally is indispensable, especially
it's
nowadays as more and more technology comes about. The prioritization is an indispensable thing, and that's one thing our culture needs to develop is more and more systems of value judgments and axiology. Thank you very much.
yeah, so yeah, I do agree.
You can't really make that. I'm sorry, Chloe. Go ahead.
Well, no, it's like, yeah, I do agree. Like that's how that happens. It's like, you're as cancer is developing in your ankle, you have to go to work, you have to get groceries, you have to pick up your kids, and those things obviously come first.
You
But
get help. hopefully you have some sort of support system. If
Yes,
you're,
but if you don't,
it's
you
a
don't
separate
realize.
argument. I'm
If,
sorry.
no,
I just don't agree with Pelu's argument, but it's kind of,
it's
I'd like you to develop um, or kind of send me links about Yang. I really didn't pay too much attention to him. Maybe I should have.
oh yeah, I will like and Yang, yeah, I see Steve is here, and I'm sorry. After you can totally talk after I speak. But yeah, the thing is, Yang, he was a UBI guy. He was the person that was advocating for UBI.
Well, no, I know that much,
But he had a
I
lot
didn't
of
get much past. I'm not
yeah.
sure I understand the
So
concept of UBI is right, but
well, his idea. I mean, the thing is that
well,
his
essentially, it's supporting junkies.
well his idea was like he's seeing automation happening. More people would basically go out of business, and with UBI, you basically be able to help offload people into different industries, right? If they had that type of stuff, or enable people to move out of less popular. Like, yeah, there was like a whole logic behind it. And now, obviously, with COVID and all this kind of stuff, there are some kind
Right,
of holes in that idea. But like he had so many other ideas of like,
right.
they're like when they would throw a question at him, it's like, well, how would all these people get this UBI? Well, he's like, well, then we would basically have post offices, basically making sure that there are you can get a bank account, like a government
Right.
bank account, so that people aren't unbanked. And if people, are able to have a bank account, save money, that would make people a lot more
Well,
financially
let me ask
stable.
you a favor. Just anything you think I need to know, just toss it up on one of the Discord things.
I'll send you a
Um,
link to his policies. They were actually
okay, all right.
very fascinating. He had like 40 different policies. His most popular one was UBI, but if you dug into them, like wow, he actually is thinking about these things, and
All right.
it is there were things that were they were nonpartisan, that both liberals and conservatives were like, yeah, okay, I can actually deal with this process as long as there is a process that
Okay.
and so that yeah so that's one reason, that's what kind of got
No,
me in.
I gave him short shrift, didn't pay too much attention to it. Please teach me.
Yeah, but again, my point about bringing up Yang is his solutions were boring. His solutions weren't as exciting as, I mean, yes, he led with his most exciting one, but his solution wasn't as exciting as
Oh,
Bernie.
so you mean nerds like us would only be excited?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like like look at Bernie Sanders, right? This idea of like we're going to make the billionaires and the millionaires pay, and it
Yeah,
adds an
that was like almost cavemanish.
it adds an emotional hook that people get
Right.
politically activated for. But the things that Andrew Yang was talking about, it didn't really excite people's emotions, or of like, oh
But
yeah, we're
see,
gonna get
to
the
to
justice. It's like
me,
it's
that's a problem with American culture.
mhm.
We want to go for the cowboy solution. And sometimes you actually have to concentrate and read a sentence or two.
Exactly.
Um, but that's kind of, I'll never win that argument because, you know, tougher people will be funnier.
Yeah,
So, anyway.
but I agree with you. I think that government should be a lot more boring, dealing with boring
Well,
issues. I understand.
now that would be against American tradition. It was never boring. We weren't created in boredom. There was war and slavery and toil and struggle. Um,
Which
that's
is
the
why I
great
prefer.
thing about America. There is always something to do or something to laugh at, or
Yeah,
we're an exciting country.
yeah. Anyway, hey
Sorry.
Steve. Yeah, Steve has been hanging out for
Yeah.
a while.
Okay, so before Steve goes, Mark is trying to come in, but I can't add him. I don't know. So maybe Mark, just try and go back out and come in again, so I can add you to the conversation. So Steve, jump right in.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure what we're talking about. Somebody clue me in because I
Select the
missed about the
topic.
first hour. We're still on topic.
No, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
we're
don't know.
still on topic, not on topic. But basically, what we're just talking about is sort of liberal impulsiveness in trying to
Well,
push for certain policies, and
well, wait,
reticence,
hold on there.
conservative reticence.
Hmm.
The topic of the show was, is the right woke? So I'm willing to wait till Charles can come back in, because I know, Steve, I'll wait till the end, because I think you're probably going to agree with me.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we, like we usually do, we go off a tangent, and so we'll find our way back to the conversation. But Steve, before you go, I wanted to address something that Stanley brought up, which I think I agree with, which is the sense of, at times doing nothing is actually worse than doing something bad, because there are a lot of things that we're not sure it's ever going to work. Nothing's ever going guaranteed to work until we at least try it out. So
Yeah.
everything in theory has the potential to be good or to be destructive, but we'll never know definitely until we try it out. And when we try it out, it doesn't work, then somehow we're wiser for it and we know what doesn't work so that we can not do it again. So just saying, well, we can't do anything because this solution might be worse than the problem is trying to fix. I don't think it's a good idea. So, Steve.
Yeah, so I can understand that. My angle on that would be, I think that's kind of a horseshit excuse to get out of trying something. I mean, obviously, we know that sometimes doing nothing is worse than doing something. Because I mean, if you're watching somebody, hang, it would be more beneficial to cut them down than it would be to not cut them down. So the argument that it's better to do nothing than something that may harm is it's kind of a
Actually, the middle ground is standing under their feet and prop them up a bit so they're not choking so much.
yeah, sure. I mean, that's one way you could argue it, but what my point being is that all three of those positions can apply and exist in the same
There's a
moment.
third option.
Hey, can I jump in real quick and say something real quick? Well, I just want you to understand the question, Steve. I think you misunderstand the question because it started off. It's not something that if you cut somebody's rope off and they know they're hanging, that's definitely going to save them. Or you have a small chance of thinking they're going to save them, right? We're talking about more experimental things that you really know about. But if it's something definite, that's not really like trying something new because you know that's going to work. You know what I'm saying? So I can't consider that trying something. That's all I want to add. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So take UBI for example. It's not difficult to try something on a small scale and start working up from there. I mean, Alaska's doing it. I think Virginia did it for a while. Both locations have been hugely successful. Why we can't institute it on a larger scale, like on a state
UBI
level or even a district level, and kind of work up to the federal level is beyond me. I don't understand why we don't do that kind of stuff. But I mean,
quick historical point. Virginia did nothing like that. I've lived there for almost 20 years.
Read Andrew Yang's book. There's a state on the East Coast that did it, and I swear to God, it was Virginia.
I would think it's Virginia. I'm gonna tell you why. I go to Virginia. I don't live in Virginia technically, but I go to Virginia every day. I pass through Virginia every day, and I know they don't got it over there in Virginia. I live right across the river from Virginia. I can see a Virginia. Like I literally can see a Virginia across the river.
Hills.
Well, just because you can see something from across the river does not mean you know what's going on
there. I literally
okay, all my coworkers live in Virginia right now. I'm gonna ask them if they got UBI. Hold on.
It doesn't matter if it's Virginia or not. That's my point. Is there was one state on the East Coast that did it. Read Andrew Yang's book. He lists it in there as one of his examples for universal basic income. It did work there.
That link in
it works in Alaska. It's worked in every place that it's been applied, and I don't know why we're not trying to scale it up federally.
Well, I think getting back to Andrew Yang, it's because he came ready for the oppositions, right? He's like, how can we pay for this, right? And he said, well, we'll basically streamline away the administrative overhead and all that kind of stuff for all these like welfare programs, right? Would you prefer to get like food stamps and then all these other individual little assistances that you have to apply for and have to talk to a social worker in order to get, or are you willing to just forego that whole process and just get a check, right? And a lot of people would just prefer to get a check, and that would save the government money. But also he came with the solution. The biggest solution how to fix it is the VAT, right? Value added tax, which I think that even if we didn't have UBI, we should implement that in taxing consumption over just basically taxing income, because a person can make a lot of money, but because they're not spending it, they're just saving it. I don't think that they necessarily should be taxed just for making money.
Hey, speaking of taxes, I think the best tax is actually a land value tax. Just for everybody, I think that's actually the healthiest tax for an economy is land value. Thank you.
Now we're getting nerdy. It's tax policy.
All right. So we have a full house now. Maybe let's recenter the conversation. Let's bring it back to what it was originally about, which is wokeness. Does wokeness exist on the right? When I started out, it was just me, and I was sort of just running off on a monologue, and I said some things along the line that when you look at the word woke, today it's more sort of being associated with the left. The left loves to say, yeah, they're woke, and the right loves to use it as a pejorative for the left. So, but
when did the left say they were woke?
No, they didn't say that they were woke. They're using it as a pejorative to call left-leaning people woke.
Well, yeah, Charles, I sent you the definition, how woke started. And, my joke is woke was colonized.
Of course, I agree with that. I agree with that. It was colonized.
It was colonized because, words evolve, and I think it has evolved to take on a different meaning right now.
But it was colonized by the left, though. It was colonized by the left, Stanley.
You are being nice. Well, as well as I do, Mr. Pellu, the left is no less racist than the right. So,
right.
Colonized is colonized.
Yeah. You can say that. But for this particular case, the woke was definitely colonized by the left. That's what it was colonized by, the intersectional left.
I'm not sure I can disagree. I'm just saying it was an equal opportunity colonization.
Well, it's any term that is associated with a group of people, like like SJW, right? Like now it is said with a pejorative, but that they, like, people on the left were using the term SJW, and if they call themselves I don't know, like red caps, people would be saying red caps in a pejorative way. It's the terms that are being associated with the group that they're deriding means that the terms that are surrounding them are going to be used pejoratives, irregardless from where they come from.
Well, I'm going to tease you now. Red caps versus SJW. Who's right? Who's wrong? This is an old McLaughlin group trick.
I know that red caps are a thing, but I don't know that much about them.
Well, I encourage you to go back and look at the old style McLaughlin group things. Mm-hmm. I grew up on that sort of stuff, and boy, those people were really right of center. But
I would suggest that instead of focusing on the definition, which we may not agree on, we move on to the behaviors and characteristics of what the left woke is and attempt to apply that to the right, because I can think of a couple examples.
Well, one thing that I said at the beginning, there is already a term like that's kind of one-to-one in terms of the original meaning, and it's red-pilled, right? Like both are indicating that people are awakening up to the realities of the world. But versus woke versus red pill, they're just coming to a different conclusion.
Well, no, that red pill stuff in the sort of African diasporan thing, it is mutated just
Well,
within kind of
Re-
a Pan-African
well,
community.
red pill existed outside of like the Pan African. It started with incels, right?
Yeah.
Or originally it was a Matrix. It's a Matrix
See, I
reference.
never understood that jump.
Because it's the plot of the Matrix is this person lives in like he has an office job, he hates his job, he's living in a constructed world, and Morpheus says take the blue pill, you're going to stay asleep and you're never going to know reality, and take the red pill and then you're going to wake up. And Neo takes the red pill and he literally sees reality for what it is, that he's plugged
God,
into a
that is.
machine. And
I'll have
that's
to take this offline. That is so theoretical.
but
Um,
that's the analogy that they were
it's a
originally
movie.
invoking. Yes, I know it's a movie. That's they were using that movie to invoke that analogy of
Well,
that's
then
what
they
it
are
feels like.
wrong if they're taking that sort of stuff and applying it to anything outside of a movie.
Well,
And
no, like
I'm
but
fussing. I know. I
it's
know I'm
it's
fussing.
it's analogy. It's an analogy. So they're not
I don't
literally
think it's a
saying,
good analogy.
but that's how they feel. They're
Right.
describing how they feel, and so that I think it is accurate, because when that's why they say like, "Oh, I've been red pilled. I now
Right.
suddenly change my mind and I see the world for what it is," and they can't unsee it. That's the
Understood.
experience that they're describing. So that's why they're saying they're red pilled, and that's more of a something that is said on the right versus the left. And then if you look on the left,
boy, are they
and
not
again,
imaginative.
yeah, but again, if you look on the left, they use the term red pilled with just as much derision as the right would say woke. It's like, oh, this guy's been red pilled, or these red pill communities, and so even if individual people say like, yeah, I was red pilled, but when the woke said, oh, these red pill people, it's said with derision.
Right.
Right. So, Steve, you wanted to get into the characteristics of the woke on the left and see if you can apply it to the right. So let's go.
Okay, so language. The left likes to dictate what language to use, like the extreme militant left likes to dictate what language is
Right
used.
does it too.
And God damn it. Can I get to my point?
Go ahead,
'Cause I was
Steve.
just
Stanley,
about ready
please
to.
let him finish his point.
So the left likes to use and control language, and the right does it in the same sense, where they like to control the language surrounding, oh, I don't know, transgender rights, gay rights, who can use the bathroom. They control language in different ways, but it's still the control of language. That's one example for sure.
The right controls actions. They don't care so much about language. And the opposite is true on the left.
Well, I'm talking about extreme right, militant left. Because the militant right definitely does control language.
I see your point.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Another thing that they like to control is how you view your world. So militant right likes to, well, quite frankly, they are conspiracy theorist professionals. They see everything everywhere intertwined, whether it's true or not. And it's very similar to the way that the left constructs its view of reality with the way it views gender. And I'm not saying any of these are wrong. I'm just pointing out the consistencies in the behavior, even though the behavior manifests differently.
So it seems that both are showing similar characteristics, but they're just expressing it in different ways. Both want to control, but they're just controlling in different ways.
Absolutely. And something I'm working on is a definition of what supremacy is, or how it functions, like such as you would have what you would consider closed supremacy, which is absolute control of people.
That's autocracy.
And then you have a kind of open supremacy, where it's the supremacy of ideas.
That's MAGA.
And So there's this idea that you can question some ideas, but not others. Right? So they're just different forms of supremacy that exist. And both sides tend to use those two same supremacies, so to speak, not to be confused with white supremacy. They're just supremacy of ideas, right? But one tends to control language and perception. The other one has a tendency to control action, behavior, laws, stuff like that. There's so many similarities between the two sides that it's difficult to separate the two in my mind.
Well, may I ask you a question? Because you brought up some really interesting points.
Sure.
And we'll table white supremacy. To me, in my peanut brain, it's all the same thing. They essentially, to put it in vernacular, they want to control the message, and messages kind of lead to action. There's virtue signaling, hence the woke part. Both sides do it. Can we agree to that point?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
and I apologize. It's hard to hear. My headset's not working and the shop's really loud. So I'm kind of having to
I'm sorry.
put my ears to the phone.
I don't know. I just don't right wokeness, and I'm not sure there's a difference between I sent Charles the definition of wokeness. You lost me at the colonization of the whole point. Kind of like jazz. But my point is, I think both sides are equally bad. I mean,
that's my argument.
At a fundamental level.
We have room here as libertarians.
I'm not talking far right. I'm not talking far left. Sometimes the middle is questionable.
Maybe. And that's possible. Well, I mean, libertarians have a tendency to be very single-minded as well.
I don't view it as the middle. Let me tell you. I have to tell you this story, Steve. You will enjoy it. I took an Uber today. This Uber driver came up with a Confederate flag on his Georgia tag. Like a Sons of the Confederacy thing. They still make those in Georgia. And you know what? I thought about asking him about it, but you know what? I fucking enjoyed the conversation. It's just an Uber ride. If there's a point here, it is sometimes you don't want to poke the bear. He delivered good service. I enjoyed his service, and that is that. I don't fucking have to see him again. And Americans sometimes, and it's a weird individuality thing, but we have to live with those people.
Well, that's my effort.
We don't know how to live with those people. This motherfucker probably wasn't that smart, but when I talked to him, I was like, "Holy shit, he's got some deep views." You know what? And I kind of lived a middle thing, and I just think that the far right and the far left have no clue sometimes. The middle right, middle left, I'm not sure they have a clue.
So basically, no one has a clue. Is that what you're saying, Stanley?
Well, I think the people that have a clue are willing to talk about it and risk being wrong.
I'm sorry.
I said the people that really do kind of have an idea of what's going on are the people that are willing to admit that they're wrong and there might be a possible other choice, whereas the majority of both the extreme right and the extreme left, and even towards the middle a little bit, they refuse to listen to other ideas like we do. They refuse to see other perspectives, other ideas. And this is kind of where my supremacy of the idea is coming from. It's like the supremacy is, in this situation, the idea that something can be a certain way, and we can decide through discourse whether it's true or not. But when you get into the extremes of both sides, you slowly move into a more closed supremacy where it's more about the supremacy of not talking about it, which is more supported.
Wow.
So there's that's what I'm trying to get to, is that the middle has a tendency to talk more to each other than the extremes.
Well, also, I would.
Sorry, Chloe.
No, I would also say that you actually have to put your money where your mouth is and actually try certain things, right? And it's like, okay, I think this is true, and this other person's, well, I think this is true. So the best thing you can do, you can't just continually try to talk it out to get to the truth. You actually have to have the rubber meets the road of like, okay, just like with, like scientific papers, right? It's like, I have this hypothesis, right? I have this hypothesis. This is how it works. These are my experience. I'm going to lay it out, and then I'm going to post the results. I'm going to show what actually came out of the results, right? And it's good to have people who have different competing ideas, and it's like, well, it could the result could be based off of this, it could be that, and then how can you ferret out is it this thing that I think it is, or is it that thing? And then figuring out the distinction between the two creates more understanding, and so more, kind of poking at other people's ideas and actually trying it, or even
poking and trying to find holes.
Yes. Yeah.
So Chloe, I gotta be quick because I gotta get back into the shop. But my main point though is that my idea of this open and closed supremacy kind of ideas, we can talk about that, right? We can say, that's a good idea, Steve, or man, that's a shit idea, Steve, right? We can talk about that, and I'm not going to be hurt if I'm wrong. You know what I mean? I'm just throwing an idea out there, but hold on.
350 million ideas.
Right. Hold on. So the reason why I'm bringing it up in this sense, and why I can say that libertarians are just as bad as anybody else, is because I don't view the political spectrum on a line. It's more like a lake to me, right? Just imagine a large body of water where each idea that comes out of each one of these positions, as it ripples out, can touch each one of the other sides. And we can see that because there's some people that live on any of these sides, right? Any of these political sides, they still retain some small idea of what another group on the extreme side holds. And so those waves are held in place in the differing sides of political water, so to speak. And so that's kind of my point, is that some of these ideas overlap, and the problem is we get ego and ideology get in the way about talking about these things.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a thought that I had. It was like in the Discord earlier, and it was like talking about Nazis and everything like that. And I realized that, especially like with any person that we conceive as our enemy, whether they're a group or a person or whatever, what we tend to do as people or as groups is that we look at the deltas of what makes us different, and then we project the differences between us and this other group, or that we view as enemy, as this is their sole motivation, and this is entirely what makes them bad, is these particular things, and we ignore the things that actually make us kind of similar, right? And we don't really want to ingest the idea that maybe an aspect that we also share with them is also making this bad as well, in conjunction with the thing that is delta. And so one of the what I brought up in the Discord was eugenics, right? We didn't fight Nazis over eugenics and forced sterilization, because in America we were doing that thing at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Beautiful.
Right?
Beautiful.
And so, but we say like, oh, well, they just hated the Jews and that's why they're so bad. It's like, well, like they took this idea of eugenics and all this purity race and all that kind of stuff to a conclusion. And it was
just a bad idea.
Yeah. And but with all these other elements, yeah, they, and then invading Poland and then, getting with Japan, which was doing the same things, right?
Can I ask you a quick thing? What if that was a sustainable idea?
Eugenics.
Yeah, because it could be done.
Well, the thing is, I think that it would probably end up such as a bad idea as Lyshenkoism, because it is a type of political science that they were trying. And when the Russians did Lysenkoism in terms of crops, they starved.
Right.
So, like in the
now
moment,
you have what you would consider ideological Lysenkoism.
But my point is, they had to fight a war to figure it out. No one sat down at a table and said, maybe I see your point. It's a bad idea.
But I think it's because
it was a war. Same thing with the Civil War.
Yeah, it was the ideology.
They had to fight it out, is my point.
Yeah, they had to fight it out. But like let's say there wasn't a war and they're allowed to continue on. I think even politically, like they would have suppressed all of the evidence of like, I don't think this is working, right? Like, I don't think this idea is working. The same thing that will happen with Lyshenkoism and, in Mao's, after his Cultural Revolution, they suppressed all of the evidence to the contrary, which points to Steve's idea of ideological supremacy. When you get into those holes, like you can't even, like you're constructing reality in a way that you can't even recognize something that defies the reality that you've been told is true.
Well, and really quickly, I wanted to add that the right complains about the commies, the left complains about fascists, and libertarians complain everybody's tyrants.
Oh my goodness! So everyone is complaining about everyone. That's good.
No.
One.
The arguments about commies and fascists, most of them were fought over wars. Most of them weren't resolved in negotiation, and that is a huge thing that most people don't really realize.
But it goes to your point of we only wait till things get to a crisis point before we resolve it, right? We don't actually.
I'm limited to America. I guess, I tend to think about, America, but yeah, it's more universal.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to touch on was the idea of conspiracy theories. I mean, if the way I relate with conspiracy theories, I'm so bad with conspiracy theories that if any of them are going to be true, it's going to totally catch me unawares, because I have this huge skepticism for something that is overly dramatic, something that is, that people just, they're trying to do this, they're trying to control this, they're trying to, so I just look at those things and I think, okay, these things are childish, these things are probably not going to happen. But do you see any cause for worry that probably some of these theories that people talk about that we call conspiracy theories, that there's some kernel of truth to it?
No.
So I will tell you my favorite conspiracy theory that's absolutely true, and it's going to blow your mind. 9/11 happens every single year.
Stop stealing stuff from me. You stole that.
Chloe, you stole that from your brother.
I did. You could hear it. And there's also another word. But I mean, like, yeah, it happens every year, right?
Chloe just got called out on live.
Hey, I love my brother, right?
You made me.
Love him enough to steal his ideas, Chloe.
I didn't steal. Like
You stole my train.
Just kidding.
No, it's my train.
You stole it.
It's mine.
You stole it from the.
You'll never.
Oh, we have
find
to
that
call
train.
Daddy now to settle this.
No, my train. Anyway, okay. I think well the thing is that calling this something as a conspiracy theory, sometimes it's a tactic to dismiss another person. So like one thing of where, let's say Canada, what's going on? Sorry.
Sorry, take a break.
Sorry. Okay, like, you know, the fact that Justin Trudeau is trying to take control so strongly, it's undeniable, right? And so when people are, I think that's the part where people are like, oh, it's a conspiracy that he's just trying to take control because he's getting out of control. And but then on the Justin side, they're saying, well, I had to do this. I had to do this to get everything back to normal. But, you know, I think it, like that's when, you know, there's a debate of like, if something is like a true conspiracy, like the world is flat, or the hollow earth, the hollow moon, which are all based in Nazis ideology and like the Thule Society and all that kind of stuff, which is hogwash. There's no basis for that. And to keep supporting an ideology that, or like a conspiracy that is nonsensical, yeah, that's crazy crackpot stuff. But I do see a sense of people, when people have very understandable concerns about the way things are going, and they are labeled as conspiracy theories as a way of dismissing them to put them in the same pot as, oh, well, you're just like a flat earther, right? Like, you know, I have a friend who's 100% for vaccines, right? She gets the flu shot every year. She gets all those things, all those vaccines. But now because she's skeptical of the COVID vaccine, now she's just as much of a crackpot as people who hate all vaccines. And I think that is to not understand the nuances and not actually be willing to, in good faith, understand their actual concerns and see like, well, no, this research that was put out to support your claim, there's flaws with it. And I think it's a bad tactic to say like, you're just a crackpot conspiracy theories just to avoid looking at their concern and taking it seriously.
Chloe, you have to explain what you meant by 9/11 happens every year, because I didn't get that.
Oh, well, I think it works more so in America because, yeah, September 11th happens every year. It's a date.
So, okay, so it's a date that is marked every year, or something of that event happens every year?
No, the date happens every year.
Oh, the date happens every year. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So technically,
right, so
9/11 happens every year.
Oh, okay, I get that. Now, looking at something to the point that you made about people calling certain things conspiracy theories, so just to discredit it. You know, when the lab leak theory came out, and it was all, you know, said to be conspiracy theory, and that's for COVID-19, and that's the virus jumped from bats to humans, or from some sort of animal to humans and all that. I think the sentiment is changing now more towards, you know, going towards the area of, okay, this probably came from a lab. So that just speaks to the point that if people are trying to discredit something, they can just put a label on it. For example, who are the people?
Discredit?
Who
are the people that are trying to discredit it?
Right.
At the beginning of the pandemic, it was a discredit. They were trying to discredit the idea. Yeah, that it was. It was also they're saying that it was racist to say that it came from a Chinese lab and stuff like that.
Well, no.
For example, Fauci.
I didn't even think it was racist. It was just unscientific.
How was it unscientific?
Well, I've worked in a chemistry lab, and it was possible, but not worth building a whole conspiracy theory on.
But I think people
people who work in labs are fairly careful.
Yeah,
but they're not perfect. They're humans.
Well, neither
accidents happen.
Neither are the conspiracy theorists.
But
of course, the conspiracy theories, they are not scientists.
Adept.
They are not scientists either. So the burden is not on the people who are making that claims. The burden is on the scientists that may or may not
No,
have caused the accident.
disagree. The burden is on people making up conspiracy theories.
Well, so
No.
Stanley, I will ask you this: do you think that there's credence to the lab leak theory?
I'm sorry.
Do you think there's credence to the lab leak theory?
It's possible.
Okay.
I mean, come on.
So why was it called a
you
conspiracy
work,
theory?
you
If it's
work
possible.
with computers, Chloe,
Mhm.
anything's possible.
Yes, but for someone like who actually is is scientifically, like Brett Weinstein, right? Like
Brett
he was
Weinstein.
please.
I will table the argument.
Yeah,
there.
I
This
understand.
dude hasn't worked in academia in how long? And
Okay.
he's not a virologist. He's an
I know.
evolutionary biologist.
Stanley?
He doesn't have that kind of expertise.
Stanley?
Yes.
He was listening to virologists.
And is he a virologist?
No, he is not. But that's the thing.
I can stop there.
I know, but like the
evolutionary biology is not virology. It's different.
I'm not saying it is.
I am not even microbiology.
I am not saying it is. You have to understand.
So you have to be a virologist for you to understand when a virologist is explaining something to you.
Absolutely.
So
that makes no fucking sense.
That makes no sense because that means
I
that
don't have to fucking make sense.
No one should.
Brett Weinstein does not have that kind of expertise. He was never.
But this is the point. You're trying to argue from authority. You are discrediting the person's credentials. You're not looking at the message.
Well,
okay. Here,
you're a pharmacologist.
If a virologist,
not a pharmacologist, I'm a pharmacist.
Yeah, if a virologist said, "I believe this was leaked from a lab," if a virologist said this,
I simply disagree.
What basis do you have to?
Possibility, but you're not going to build a whole theory.
Here is the thing. No, here is the thing. No one
believes.
Okay, let's table Brett Weinstein. Whatever. I regret bringing him up at all. I am saying.
I'm sorry.
I am saying that. If medical professionals who have expertise in virology, when I actually looked at the data on COVID,
the medical person you're mentioning,
multiple virologists. You want me to give you names off the top of my head?
Dude,
I don't have.
I can array.
Here is the thing. Here is the thing, Stanley. I am saying that there are medical professionals with the relevant background that were saying this is possible. And when lay people heard
there are just as many who think it's not possible. Correct.
So why is one position seen as a conspiracy theory and the other not seen as a conspiracy theory? If you have admitted that it's a possibility, if you have admitted that
we do not know is my point.
We do not know does not mean that when someone brings up a theory, then you call it a conspiracy theory.
Here's the thing right now. People don't view it as a conspiracy theory anymore. People don't view it as a conspiracy theory anymore.
Well, okay, people don't. Who are the people? Some do, some don't.
No, most people. Like the thing is, the point that I'm bringing up is at the beginning of the pandemic, they dismissed it as a conspiracy theory. You're crazy, all these things. But then when people started speaking, can I finish? Okay.
Please.
When people started speaking out, and then they also noted that there was a lab in Wuhan that was studying gain of function. There is a virology lab in Wuhan that was 2 blocks away from where they claimed this virus was released, right? So how is that a crazy out of the wall conspiracy theory on the same level?
It's crazy. I'm saying it's not worth a conspiracy theory. We don't.
But it's that means it's not a conspiracy theory. It means that we should not label it as a conspiracy theory, and it's erroneous to call it a conspiracy theory.
It as we don't know.
But that's not what they're doing. They're saying it's a conspiracy theory, which is the point of contention. Why was it called a conspiracy theory if we do not know?
Is both sides are wrong. We don't know. Both sides.
There's a saying in my country that when the gods wants to kill, a man or a dog, it gives it a bad name. And that's what's
Well,
happening
you're
here.
you're
You
doing the
understand?
same thing as Ogie. I'm sorry. Sayings are not necessarily logic. We don't
Of course, they
know
are not
is
necessarily
my
logic.
point.
They're intended to convey an emotion or a point. The point I'm making is that, which is a point that you actually made earlier, is that because they want to discredit this position, what they do
Who's
is, or
they?
whoever, you understand the sense in which I'm using it. I'm not required to mention anybody and say this is the person who is saying this. There are people who certainly oppose this theory, and they want to discredit it, so they'll just slap the label of conspiracy theory on it so that nobody gives it any attention.
It
Instead of
it
trying to say, okay, what
I
is your
don't know.
evidence?
Conspiracy
If you
theories
say it's a
seem to
lab
bring
leak,
a lot of attention to it.
if you say it's a lab leak, what are your evidence for it? That is the way it should be, not saying it's a
Well, no,
conspiracy
if it's a
theory and
lab
nobody should
leak,
give it uh,
that is a
attention.
huge thing. Um, you know, dude, I've worked in labs. If it's a lab leak, we need to just destroy the lab
well
and
that's
start over.
the thing
However,
is,
do we know
well,
conclusively?
the thing is, if by calling it a conspiracy theory, they're putting a big stop, like don't even try,
Who is
don't.
they?
The CDC called it a conspiracy theory. The media called it a conspiracy theory. They said
Who's
no, it didn't happen. It didn't
I
happen.
see. So
So the people, and then also it
who's
turns
called it truth?
the people who want action against
So
China.
Stanley,
Well,
why are you
no, I'm
acting like
confused
you've not been
now.
listening to the media?
Who's called it absolute?
I'm not. Here's the thing. I'm not saying it's absolute. Let's say, like, here's the thing, right? When they said
Well,
we
no,
think this
you
is,
were
it
talking about
can't.
media, Chloe.
I
Please
know.
don't think,
Like,
please don't
please.
think that I'm saying you were doing
I
this, but you
know.
mentioned media.
I know, but here's the thing, right? Let's say, I'm gonna say, like, let's say, like a 90s kids movie where these kids are watching their neighbor and they see, like, I think our neighbor is kidnapping and keeping people in the basement, right? Right? And so, like, if the kids go to the adults and say, like, I think that this is happening because I see, like, there are things that are left in the yard or whatever, the adults, if the adults don't want to do anything, right? They
I
say
see.
you're crazy. But if the adult's like, okay, I think there's something weird going on. So what the adult does is they take that information, they don't know if it's true or not, and they go to that person's house. Maybe maybe they talk to the neighbor, or maybe they ask maybe they go to the cops saying, hey, my kid saw something. Maybe
Right.
check out this person's basement. So that's what
Let
was
me ask
issue
you a
with this
question.
COVID. I want to finish, right? That's what the
Okay.
issue with this calling this a conspiracy theory, because it stopped people from actually trying to investigate the lab. I agree, we need more information to understand and know what actually happened. But when people called it a conspiracy theory, that put the kibosh on actually, hey, let's actually go to the lab and actually see what happened, and let's actually maybe
Understood.
try to hold them accountable. But by calling it a conspiracy theory, it stopped that action.
Well, let me ask you a question. Who are the kids and who are the adults?
From what I understood, like, in terms of the scientific community, right? Like, there were some virologists that were saying, when I look at this looks like the product of a gain of function process, right?
But that happens naturally.
But what they were noticing, this looks like it's manufactured. There
It's
are
why
certain
the flu mutates every
I
year.
know, but the gain of function research happens. And that
Right.
Wulong lab is one of the places where they do gain of function in the world.
Right.
And there are only a few labs in the world. My university in Alaska was one of the places where they actually did gain of function. They had the Ebola virus there, right? There are places in the world that does do these things. And they also were explaining, they're also explaining why people had the instinct to say, no, it wasn't a lab leak, because if you're associated with an industry or a field of study that caused this lab leak, that means that potentially all these other places that have proper processes that are doing gain of function safely, suddenly they could be defunded. So they have a conflict of interest. And so it's understandable why they So it's understandable why they're hesitant to immediately say like, yeah, it looks like a lab leak, because they might be pulling the funding out of their own research and out of their own labs. So they were very cautious to even kind of admit that, and that's understandable. It doesn't even require a conspiracy on the part of the virologists, because the virologists that were speaking out saying, I really do think it's a lab leak, they were even giving an explanation as to why it wasn't even a malicious kind of omission. Right? They weren't as vicious, or they weren't as attributing malice as much as the people saying, oh, people who say it's a lab leak, they're conspiracy theorists, they're just racist against Chinese people, they're crazy, in order so that they have an excuse as to why they didn't hold China to hold China more accountable if it was just a random, random virus from nature.
China should be held heavily accountable. However, I'm not so sure that America and America's leadership shouldn't be held second tier accountable. But my point is, there are as many virologists that would disagree with every virologist that wants to do the theory or the lab leak stuff. I think the lab leak is certainly possible, almost probable. I mean, we the world, and especially the scientific community, we're due an F up. However, it has not been proven conclusively.
And why not?
Okay.
We have to give credence to the theory in order to
I don't have a problem with the theory.
Okay, now, Stanley, you're not being consistent here, and I'll have to say it. But before I get to that point, now, I personally, I don't know. I don't subscribe to any of the theories, whether it's a lab leak, whether it happens naturally. I don't have any evidence to come to that conclusion. My point is, if there is a theory, if the theory is plausible, if there's any possibility that it could have been this theory, then it should be investigated to the full extent, so that we know at least
Absolutely
that whether or not it was. And that was the point I was making, and you just said no, 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 no. But that's not what happened. What happened was that this
I'm
theory.
sorry, maybe
Wait, let me finish my point. This theory came up, and the authorities, I can say, started calling it a conspiracy theory, even without investigating. And that's not good science. That's not good.
Which authority?
Fauci. I would say Fauci. Yes, the WHO, the World Health Organization. They called it a conspiracy theory.
But I'll stop teasing you there.
No problem. I didn't say Fauci was working with WHO. I'm just stating the authorities that were saying such things, that there's no credence to the lab leak theory. You understand? So what they should have done is, okay, let them investigate to the fullest extent and get conclusive evidence that it wasn't a lab leak. Then everybody would, it's not scientific to call something a conspiracy theory when there is a possibility that it could happen.
Right.
So why would they do something like that? That's been my whole point, man. It wasn't to say that that was really what happened. I have no idea how this virus arose, and I'm not making any judgment on that.
I'm gonna say that my judgment, and I haven't done biochemistry in 30 years. However, it's a political point. I'm not sure Fauci was able to be truthful or give his thoughts. Dr. Birx either. It's a political point. Please understand my political point. You know how I feel about number 45. I'm not sure that, it started bad for me when the president had sick people on a ship on the West Coast, and there were 15 or so who had COVID, and he wouldn't let them come ashore because it would ruin the numbers. He lost me there, and it went south from there. And maybe I should just stop there. It was bad management. It was just weird. When we start talking numbers, to Chloe's point, or a point I made to Chloe, when we start talking system versus people, we go wrong. So
Uh,
I think I don't like conspiracy theory. I think the lab leak is plausible and possible and should be investigated to hell and back, just to make sure that there wasn't a mistake. However, my biggest thing is there was just mismanagement, and to bring in a Fauci, um, I'd have quit like 5 years ago. Um, he must like being scrappy, because when I couldn't say what I thought, I'd have quit.
yeah, and but those are two different points. Those are, in fact, the
How
point you
so?
made about management. The point you made about management or mismanagement, those are secondary points. In fact, those are tertiary points.
How
Those have
so?
nothing to do with the those have nothing to do with the investigation of the origin of the virus.
No, they have
We
everything
we
to do.
No, they don't.
Mismanagement from the top
They don't.
controls how things are investigated.
So are you saying?
Mismanagement from the
So I'm saying. So you're
Go
saying
ahead,
Trump?
Chloe.
You're saying Trump could have stopped Fauci from investigating the lab leak theory?
No, I'm saying Trump pretty much was the face of COVID. And
Fauci's
all
the face of
people that
COVID.
all the people that worked below him pretty much had to go with the way he wanted to run his administration, and he was president.
Right.
So
He
now
runs it.
Biden is the
He
face of
runs
COVID
it.
right now.
Biden has nothing to do with the start of COVID.
But okay, but here's the thing, right?
Are we agreed on that part?
If
How does
No,
if-
we're
Biden
not.
have to do with my
we're
point?
not. But here's the thing.
We're not agreed on that.
If
Biden had something to do with Trump's management of COVID?
we're not, I'm
We're
not
not
talking
talking about. You said Trump was the face of COVID because Trump was president then. So
Was he president
so
when
as the
February
coronavirus gone,
of-
has the coronavirus gone now? If it hasn't gone, then Biden is currently the
Irrelevant.
face of COVID.
I'm talking
No, it's
the
not
start.
irrelevant.
You're talking the end.
We're
so
talking the start. Did Trump
No.
manufacture the
Pick
virus?
a timeline, beginning or end. Charles,
You're not being consistent,
I am being perfectly
Stanley.
consistent.
Chloe, go ahead.
Who was the president at the time we knew
Trump.
COVID
Here's the thing.
existed
Trump
in
was
America?
Trump was the president. No one is contesting that. But
I'm done. My only
okay,
point.
okay. So I'm gonna ask you a question, right? So if Trump was the president and Trump drives the train, then why didn't the lab leak theory get investigated?
Who knows? That's Trump. Ask Trump.
Trump supported the lab leak theory, but Fauci
Trump
countered
had
him.
no clue.
I know. Guess what?
Well,
Not
guess
one.
what? I
Here's
expect a
the thing.
president
People
to
don't
be
have
advised and have a clue. We stopped there.
in order
A
in
leader
order to
has
get
a
information. In order to get information, you need to investigate that. And the CDC did
Is
not want to
Fauci-
investigate that.
Is CDC? This dude has infinite resources.
So Trump has
So
resources.
you're going to tell me, as president, if I were Trump, I'm going to rely on Fauci?
So Trump
You got
has
a
resources.
CIA,
Here's
a bunch of stuff.
Okay. Here's the thing, right? You were talking about if you have the expertise in virology.
The CIA. Why did he bring in Fauci? Why did he bring in Fauci?
President, here's my point. A president has a myriad of resources, flows of information. You don't have to trust Fauci, and I'm not sure he ever did. But my point is, how many
it's not about trust.
streams of information does
it's not about it's not about trust. It's not about trust, right? So
well, of
how
course it is.
here is the thing, right? just because you're president doesn't mean that you can
just
make.
because you're president.
Here,
Is that the excuse?
Stanley, let her finish your point.
Okay.
presidents are not all-knowing, omnipotent gods.
Then
They are still people. They are still people, and they are relying on organizations and bodies that are also filled with people that have imperfect knowledge as well.
my point
And
is how many
and so if you are relying on an organization that has kind of a counter agenda or is disagreeing with you on a certain end, you might have limited resources or reach into that organization to use their expertise. Because yes, Trump probably has access to the CIA, but how many virologists do the CIA have access to in order to investigate that versus the CDC? Okay, if you're going to be a biochemist, or if you're going to study diseases, you're going to work with the CDC. It's like comparative advantage, right? And like, let's say Trump had complete 100 control, and he had the resources to get all of the people who knit booties, whatever, for babies. Yeah, he has that resource, but that doesn't mean that they have the ability to do whatever he wants. They don't have that skill set. So you have to look at the skill set and the accesses of, like, if they can get stuff done. Who like, how do we know someone at the CIA knows the contacts to the Wuhan lab? It's more likely the CDC does. And looking at the email leaks of Fauci, he had contacts at
the CDC.
So Trump had perfect control of the
CDC.
Stanley, could you please stop interrupting so that we'll have a much more seamless flow? When she finishes her point, you can get your points across, please. Thank you.
Like, throughout Trump's presidency, there are so many bodies that were actively saying, we don't stand with Trump. We're going to be in opposition to Trump. We're not going to be perfect. We're not going to work in his agenda. That was the whole resist thing, right? So just suddenly now, when you want to say Trump, I think it's kind of a cop-out to say Trump had perfect control over everything, therefore everything falls under him. Just look at what happened. So how was Trump responsible for what happened in New York under Andrew Cuomo, right? Trump didn't make Andrew Cuomo put elderly COVID patients back in to put COVID patients in elderly homes, and Andrew Cuomo was up on CNN, almost every day with his brother saying, yeah, I'm doing things that Trump isn't doing. I'm taking charge, and people are talking about his presidential run, and he was doing all these things to outshine Trump. And then push comes to shove, showing that a lot of these policies that he was showing that he was doing better than Trump, when these other states implemented the exact same policies he was doing, they had a spike in elderly deaths, right? And then Cuomo tried to cover it up. So to blame how COVID has happened in all the states is to ignore the agency of states' rights, and that they actually did decide to do things different from Trump. They decided to, we're going to oppose Trump. We're going to impose more mandates and all these policies, and we're going to show up Trump. And then the time shows, if those things worked out, and a lot of those policies that people are following from Andrew Cuomo didn't work out, how can we blame Trump on that?
Well, to quote Ogie, that's a story for the gods.
Welcome, Ogie.
Okay, that's a great introduction.
Stanley's just been Stanley.
Yeah, Stanley said you said it like a true Nigerian. That's exactly
it.
That's the
story for the gods.
Well, I'm as smart as a Nigerian.
Anyways, guys,
I also have to give y'all something. I like the work ethic, but you're not always right. So I'll concede.
Yeah, we're not trying to be right all the time.
No.
Trying to have a conversation.
Good day, Charles, Chloe, Mr. Pelu, Stanley. Lovely build. I've been enjoying listening to you guys. I just wanted to jump in real quick, give my 2 cents, and then try to jump back out and continue learning from this brilliant conversation. I mean, first and foremost, like with conspiracies, Charles, I mean, for me, my perspective is I take conspiracies very loosely because at the end of the day, conspiracies are basically an agreement or an agreement between two people that you're not aware of, right? So there's always that unknown element, and that element could either be evidently true or evidently false. So I guess the main thing, which because I kind of think at the end of the day, Chloe and Stanley are saying the same thing, which is we really don't have the facts, right? We could make intelligent conjectures, we could make intelligent analysis, but we really don't have the facts, and the facts come out over time, right? So for me, it's always kind of been I also think that there is a like Steve was saying in terms of like the left and the right, this pattern of co-opting language and kind of bastardizing it or demonizing language. And I kind of think that's what's going on with conspiracies or conspiracy theories, is that it's kind of almost become this form of gaslighting. But there are merits to it if individuals decide to be patient with the kind of information that is coming to them, right? So I think they have a place. I think conspiracy theories could
Yo,
be things that you.
how does and I mostly agree about probably 98%. How is gaslighting good? Unless, it's like, kids who have to go down and, do something, you have to convince them.
Oh no, no,
Um,
it's not. It's not good. I wasn't saying it was.
okay, my bad.
Yeah, no, no, I wasn't saying it was. Yeah, and that's kind of like the whole point of how they put it, the what I would term the pejorative um uh the the pejorative potential encountered when someone dances with conspiracy theories, because you do run that potential, or conspiratorial theories. So basically, the bottom line is, these things are not necessarily, they're not necessarily, how do I put it, they're not necessarily things that operate outside the bounds of kind of normal human interactions. These are secretive things people do in private, and two
Yeah.
parties know or three parties know, and other people don't know. That's basically a conspiracy. But over
I
time, yeah, over time, with information, right? People tend to know if the conspiracies was some bullshit or if there's merit to it. So that's kind of how I see it. I treat it loosely.
you're bringing up actually a huge point. And I'm not sure, we'll have to go offline with this, but um it kind of goes back to a point I've had um with the whole American US, to be specific, and there's a backstory to that. Um Sometimes people don't want to know the truth. That's a movie. Um we'll have to go offline. Um I'll go way offline. Um why don't people want to know this stuff? Um and there's a point behind my question.
Hmm.
Wh- do people not have time to know? Do they
I
care not to know? Is it too much of a hey, I'm busy living life sort of know? But government, you know, controls life. It tends to affect life. I've never understood why people don't get more involved.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I could only what I would say to that is this. I really think people try to know, right? Like I really think people try to. I mean, there's a reason why people subscribe to, news channels and news outlets, and try to source news of social
Yeah,
media.
but
So
not a
people,
lot of people, not a majority of people.
yeah, depending on access, right? Depending on access, depending on education, so there's a lot of things that play into it. But what
Well,
I
that's my
s-
backstory. There are a
yeah,
whole lot of reasons why. Please go on. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but
no,
that's
that's
the backstory. We're not trained to be that way
yeah,
as kids.
yeah. Because yeah, I mean, and this is maybe something that I don't know, anyone could chime in on. It could also be the fear of being wrong or being atrociously wrong, right? Because we know, especially within the political space, anything that could be or can be no anything that could be manipulated can. So so these things, they change from time to time, and I guess intelligent people, or people that I would perceive to, have some level of intelligence, recognize this. So a lot of times people holster their weapons.
Name me the last time there was a political train wreck that a bunch of people died.
That are,
Vietnam is the last one I can recall.
um
I think the Libya
Well,
thing.
in a U.S. sense, I
uh,
know there have been. Yeah, you
would
could go to Rwanda, but please
would
forgive my
wouldn't you
ignorance.
say,
It was a dumb question, quite
but
frankly.
wouldn't you say
Sorry.
Afghanistan too? When you say that was a political wreck?
I think you
Well,
said Libya.
Yeah,
damn
oh,
it,
Libya. Yeah.
Yeah, I
you
said
are
Libya.
making me reckon. Huge, huge mistake. Iraq.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, Iraq. Yes. There you
we
go.
we are we are dumb Americans apparently. Maybe you were right. Maybe we are imperialists.
So I mean, like, as
That's
Augie
not
was,
even up for argument.
yes, yes, but as Augie was talking, it's like, why people don't inform, but you know, in order to get involved, like the more meaningful ways of getting involved politically, I think, is on the local level, right? People should go to the,
Yep.
school boards. They should go to their, like their local council. But that's the thing, is that, like, how often do people have time for that? Do they even know? And do they? Most of the time it's boring. And it kind of gets to the original point of, like, when you to actually really do the right thing and to stop things before there's a train wreck, because people only act when there's, like, all the issues have piled up to the point where they can't ignore these issues anymore. But, like, to actually do the things of, being informed on the things that you actually have effect change over, right? I don't think it's very informative, but kind of feels informative. Like, if there was, like, for the Gabby Petito case, right? Regardless if you think the motivations as to why that was a big thing, but for most people, it was mostly something that gawk at. But, like, that didn't really affect my day-to-day life. And even the facts coming out of the case, or, like, the circumstances, there's nothing out of that case that I learned to apply to my own life that's relevant to me, really. I'm not going on a cross country trip with a mentally unstable fiance. I'm just not. So it's not relevant to me, but people were glued to that as if they were learning something, but it's really entertainment. But the real true knowledge, and that you can use, that can apply to your life, because it's applying to your life, I think on a certain level is inherently boring, and people want to do more exciting things.
I must ask you this question, and I know I'm interrupting. Um, and it's going to be a horrible question, in a larger philosophical sense, and it kind of goes back to one of the things you brought up. Do we be conservative and not go, or not take a chance? Because, a bunch of times, I think Petito was a rather rare case. Or do you disagree?
Well, I
I
think
mean, do you take a chance or do you
I've
not?
I've taken a bunch of chances, but
Well,
like
not, no, no, no. I
like
didn't
like
mean to make it personal. I mean, in a larger sense,
Mhm.
should people take a chance?
I do think so. I do think so. Like the thing is well, but the thing that came out of the Gab Petito case is that they, in the process of trying to find a body, they found a bunch of other bodies. Like I think at least
Yeah, but
11 other people. But um, I
in a
I
larger sense, though.
I do think it's worth it to take a chance, right? And in getting back to like the liberal versus conservative, I don't even think conservatives are saying don't take a chance because they're all for people starting a business. That's a huge risk. That's a huge chance.
Yeah, but it's not
And
love.
I know, like chance, like it's not, there's, they're not, there are a bunch of different types of chances, right? So that my point is they're not 100% against chances. They're not 100, they're not saying only do things that have been done before and never
Right.
never try something new. I
But
don't think
it's not a pure chance. There are ways to hedge a loss, correct? You
right,
don't,
exactly.
if you're a wise businessman, you don't lose outright. There
Right.
are hedges, there are ways to limit losses.
Mhm.
Um,
I
I
think
don't
that's
know.
I think that's the balance, right? You should be able
I
to
don't see it as a balance. I see it
take,
as
well,
a hedge.
you should be able to take the chance, but at least it's like you have two components of yourself.
Chance is not risk.
Well, risk, chance, I guess I'm using them interchangeably, but like if I wanted to by myself go on a cross country trip by myself or whatever, right, and I plan it all out, part of me has to be that conservative person that thinks, what if this happens, what if this happens, what if that happens, right? That's important because then I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, I will take into account these concerns, right? That's how you integrate, like I want to go out and do these things, but I have to be cautious because I have to be aware of what can go wrong. And you have to combine those two viewpoints in order to move forward in the world, irregardless. And I would call it irresponsible if someone was only bright side and thought nothing ever bad was ever going to happen, and they just kind of didn't do anything to mitigate anything bad happening to them. Then I would call that foolish. I wouldn't call them trying to go out and do something foolish, but the fact of they never took into account what could go wrong as the foolish part.
All right. I think we have to end the stream at this
I have a
point.
question.
So, Anand just came in. So, Anand,
I have a
briefly,
question for Ogie at least, if that's possible. Okay,
all
can I
right,
ask?
ask your question. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, Anand has left. So, guys, I think this has been a fruitful conversation, although it was very, very choppy because at the point we were talking on each other, above each other. Well, it was still a good one. For me, I think that as regards the topic of conversation, we have summed it up quite well. That yes, the right has its own sort of wokeness, and eerily, their tactics are sort of similar, like what Steve outlined in terms of them wanting to control language or wanting to control action. You understand? I see both sides trying to do that. It's just that this side will tell you this is the kind of language you can control, and this is the kind of language that you can let go. The other side doing this, basically doing the same thing. So yeah, work can be of both sides. So Anand is back. So Anand, just ask a question so that we ask a question to Ogie so that we can hop
Okay,
off
so I
for now.
don't think Ogie is on, but if he's so, then maybe
Oh, I think
Chloe
he's
could
left.
answer. What happened to the conservatives? Why have they turned anti-free trade, anti-business, anti-globalization, pro-big government regulations, pro-big government in general, anti-capitalist?
Why
I don't
conservatives are
think
anti?
they have.
They They saw the problems with supply side economics.
So your question is conservatives are anti-capitalist, right? Why?
No, this is very new. This didn't exist 10 years ago. This is the case now.
So what I've seen, and I'll probably give this to Stanley. This was very apparent on with Trump, right? Of him wanting to bring manufacturing back and all these types of things, and because what they're seeing is, maybe we should have kept these jobs. Maybe there is a cost. There is a cost benefit analysis to have to do with exporting a lot of jobs, and it also has to do with kind of this marketing of we'll just save a lot of money, we'll ship a lot of these jobs, but they didn't take into account maybe the downside, and they weren't really prepared to mitigate for that. Like if like again, it gets back into, if you have like this pie in this idea that you want to push for, that you want to progress towards, right? You have more credibility, and you can actually help steer you can reduce your risk, and you can by being honest about the potential downfalls of the situation, right? And they kind of didn't do that. They kind of sold too rosy of an image, and because they didn't note the downsides early on enough, it's now biting them in the ass, and now they're like, oh, I didn't really think about this, and so now they're kind of having to reevaluate if it was all tulips and roses as they kind of originally claimed. And I think if they actually had come into the decision with a clear-eyed and actually had acknowledged those things, and maybe would have had the opportunity to plan or mitigate for those things. Like if we had, like in the 80s, right, and all this manufacturing stuff had planned for, transitioning people into other industries as, and industries, were going overseas, we probably wouldn't be in this mess of like, oh no, maybe globalization is bad, because they just didn't prepare for the reality of it.
I see elements of the woke, as in Marxism, entering much of the right. So another example of this would be
I mean, populism.
80%. Huh?
Populism, right?
I don't know. These are just labels, but I'll give you another example. 80% of Caucasian males who don't have a college degree now vote Republican, right? We're seeing, and it's not just that, you're seeing a general shift among the less educated towards the right, right? And the poor towards the right.
But how is
And
that Marxism though?
well, they're
I have a
it's like anti-intellectualism, right? Among the top performers
But how is that
academically.
necessarily anti-intellectualism because somebody who's not college educated was right? How is that necessarily anti-intellectualism?
Okay, so then look at the top performers on standardized tests, right? It used to be that these were dominated by people on the right at one time. That's no longer the case
when.
anymore. It's the opposite.
But how is that anti-intellectualism? That's what I'm trying to figure out. How is that
I think a lot of
anti-intellectualism?
conservatives no longer, they're this anti-math, anti-science is not just coming from the left, it's coming from the right now too.
How is that anti-math, anti-science?
How
Because
Then why aren't they
I
doing
don't get
better?
that.
that
Why aren't
Yeah,
they doing
but
better?
I still don't get. Look, it's two different points you're making, Anna. You said it's Marxist, then it's anti-intellectual because somebody who didn't perform good on the standardized test is voting Republican. How did that? Because they didn't perform good on the standardized test, does that make them anti-intellectual?
No, I'm asking different. I'm saying that the reason they're not performing well, and what my suspicion is, that there's an anti-intellectualism that has now become much more mainstream on the right as well as the left. Anti-math, anti-science.
But the thing is that, okay, if you need a plumber, if you need a plumber,
who invented intellectualism? It's not a new thing.
it's like
I'm not.
I'm trying to figure out who. I'm trying to figure out who's anti-intellectual.
yeah. I mean, like the
good old days. That whole logic is anti-MAGA. Make America great again. We weren't great enough. It's gonna be more or less of a philosophical argument, but Who invented anti-intellectualism?
I'm going to just
My
give one
goodness,
comment.
it
Someone
was
said, "I
in
love
the
love hated. I love
U.S.
love hated."
Constitution anti-intellectualism. Horrible argument and upsetting, quite frankly. Literally, I can tell you how the Constitution was not intellectual. It was economic. And anyone who doesn't understand this sort of stuff is anti-intellectual.
Well, Trump said this in public. I love less educated. I love less educated.
Intellectual.
So, okay. So, Anon, do you think that we should produce more economists? We should just have more
people strong in STEM in general. Yes.
No, well, I don't consider economics STEM. It includes math, but like STEM is involved in like you're actually producing technologies. Economics is about like you have to deal with the human element, so it's a softer type of.
Sure, but economics is a gateway to the consulting companies, right? Economics is basic data science.
Okay, but the thing is, you don't need that many economists.
I disagree. You need a lot more, but in the private sector, in things like data analytics, data science.
The thing is, we don't need as many of those people as we need like construction workers, plumbers, electricians. Like there is value in people not deciding to go to college. Like I don't think that we should just push as many people into getting a degree that is competing for a small like I don't know.
Chloe, I'm going to support your argument.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, guys. I think this is enough for today. You guys don't pile on, and we'll talk about this some other time.
Chloe,
so
I absolutely agree with your point.
All right, guys. So that will be it for today. Thank you guys for coming, and catch you in another live stream. It's good night for now. Bye.
Night.